Now we'll talk about interacting with others, so play, as well as gender and gender differences. Infants at 6 months notice and respond to one another, but by about 12 to 15 months, they start to engage in parallel play. This is where toddlers play alone, but they're watching each other. They're keenly interested in what other people are doing. By 15 to 18 months, children engage in simple social play, and this is where children are engaging in similar activities and interacting with one another a little bit. So maybe they're coloring together, for example, and they'll every so often comment like, "Your Christmas tree looks really nice." At about 2 years of age, cooperative play emerges, and this is where play is organized around a theme, and children take on special roles based on the theme. So an example of cooperative play would be like playing a game of hide and seek. There's clearly a hider and clearly a seeker. So all of these forms of play, they tend to emerge in this order: parallel, simple social, and cooperative, but they all coexist in early childhood. So in 3 to 6 year olds, solitary and parallel play actually account for as much of the child's play as cooperative interaction. But it's not you don't have to be concerned if a child is engaging in solitary and parallel play a lot. It's only certain types of non-social activities that are cause for concern. I mean, most solitary preschoolers simply like to play alone, but their solitary activities are positive and constructive. Make-believe play promotes cognitive development. So make-believe play is really great. It moves children toward more abstract play. It also allows children to understand values and traditions that are expressed through make-believe or imaginary characters. So Mr. Rogers' TV show did a great job of using make-believe play and expressing values or traditions through his characters. It also helps children explore frightening topics. Through make-believe play, like Lenny used to love to pretend that there was a monster or there was a ghost chasing us, and he would run away from the monster. So this is good because it helps children just explore these more frightening topics. It promotes more advances in language, in memory, reasoning, and understanding of other people's thoughts, beliefs, and feelings. So it's also important to remember that imaginary playmates are not cause for concern either. Imaginary playmates are good because they promote imagination, sociability, and adjustment. So pretend play, you guys, it's a regular part of a preschooler's play, but by 16 to 18 months, children clearly understand the difference between pretending and reality. But make-believe play is really great, and it's a good thing to promote. Okay, so let's now start to talk about some gender differences. So first, let's just define what a social role is. A social role is a set of cultural guidelines as to how a person should behave. Gender roles are among the first that children learn. So gender stereotypes then are beliefs about males and females that are often used to make inferences about a person simply based on their gender. So gender roles, there's really nothing necessarily negative about a gender role because they can provide information to that person about how to act or how to behave. Gender stereotypes then, those are going to be when people make some sort of attribution toward a person simply based on their gender. So our world is not gender neutral. Even as young as 18 months, we see that girls and boys look longer at gender stereotyped pictures of toys. 4-year-olds, by the time they're 4, they have extensive knowledge of gender stereotyped activities and some behaviors or traits. So it's just important to think about that you have a firm idea of what you think about conforming to gender stereotypes. So obviously there are some gender stereotypes that maybe are more neutral, but there could also be some gender stereotypes that are more negative. So this could then be a problematic if a child is conforming to gender stereotypes. For example, the gender stereotype that women are bad at math. Well, if a girl conforms to all gender stereotypes, she might then start to believe that she's bad at math, and that's probably an idea that we don't want to promote. So it's just important to think about, how are children being treated when it comes to these gender stereotypes. What types of toys do they have? What types of clothes? What types of play do they engage in? What are their roles? So did you have gender stereotypes growing up? Did your parents fit strongly into different gender roles? Do you think you'd want your children to conform to these gender roles? Are there some gender roles or gender stereotypes that are okay and some that aren't? So I do have a video to watch. It's kind of interesting. One thing we have seen is that gender stereotyped toys that are more directed toward boys actually promote better spatial reasoning skills, whereas the gender stereotyped toys directed towards girls don't really promote those same skills. So this is kind of just an interesting video that I hope that you'll watch. We do see that studies of gender differences find that males and females are different in several ways. So girls tend to have greater verbal skills and boys have greater spatial skills. Girls are actually better at math in elementary school, but then boys start to become better. We do see that this is starting to change, though, with all of the emphasis on women in STEM. Memory, we see differences here. Women remember the identity of objects and their location more accurately than men. If you think about, I don't know, this is definitely a stereotype, but it's true for me. My husband can never seem to find things in the fridge. And so they'll be like, where's this? Where's that? And I don't even have to look in there and can tell him where it is. So it's kind of interesting. Girls and women, they're more readily influenced by others in a variety of situations. In virtually all cultures that have been studied, males are more physically aggressive, but girls are more likely to resort to relational aggression. Think about Mean Girls, if you've seen that movie, where they try to hurt others by damaging their relationships with peers. So girls are better able to express their emotions and interpret other people's emotions. And gender differences depend, though, on the person's experience. So this is just very general. These gender differences may fluctuate over time. They don't necessarily apply to all boys or all girls. So when it comes to gender typing, or basically how children learn gender, what we see is that children learn gender roles in much the same way that they learn other social behavior, by watching the world around them. So parents and others can shape appropriate gender roles in children, and children can learn what their culture considers appropriate for males and females just by observing how adults and peers act. So in behavior related to gender roles, we see that parents respond differently to sons and daughters. Parents, they tend to interact equally with sons and daughters. They're equally warm and encouraging, but when it comes to gender roles, they can act differently. After the first child is born, parents typically become more traditional in gender-related attitudes. So fathers, more than mothers, treat sons and daughters differently. They're more likely to encourage gender-related play. They might punish their sons more, but accept their daughter's dependence. So, if a son falls down, telling him to buck up, whereas if a daughter falls down, comforting her and picking her up. This might be a difference that you see with fathers. Mothers tend to respond based on each child's needs, whereas fathers are going to be more likely to respond based on gender stereotypes. So results really support social learning theory and gender schema theory. And this is where children decide so remember, social learning theory is where you learn by imitating and by modeling. With gender schema theory, children are basically deciding if an object or an activity or behavior is associated with males or females, and then they use that information to decide whether they should learn more about it. So children learn more than just what behaviors are associated with gender, but they start to identify with one group and then develop their own gender identity, so their own sense of self as male or female. That's what gender schema theory says. So even though mothers tend to respond based on each child's needs, they rarely contradict or question children's gender stereotyped statements. We also know that gender typing involves peer influence. So if peers are clearly not thinking, that it's okay to engage in more boy play or more girl play, then you'll see changes in how people are expressing their gender.